you want to go into it like that. So Jake,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking this time out today, because I just want you to sort of give a little bit of a brief background into yourself and, obviously the project that you're working on. As I say, it's something that is extremely close to my own heart, having an 8-year-old son. And it's absolutely, for me, imperative that I teach him from a young age that to understand and respect his emotions and to learn to grow with them. So over to you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. So yeah, my name's Jake Trigg. I'm a father of two boys, a single father, and they're 4 and 6. And the work that I'm doing is really for them. So like this is my third kids book, and
Okay.
I write the stories that I would like them to have. So my first one was about golf and the love of golf. And then I had my life just kind of like totally up upheaval, just totally changed around. And so now I'm writing this book on emotions because I see it's such an important thing for us to learn. And in particular, this book is about emotional expression. And it's a process. So what I'm trying to do with this book is normalize emotional expression.
Mm.
And because what I see is that there's all of these there's a lot of good and helpful frameworks out there, like RAIN or emotional intelligence or what was the other one? But these frameworks, what they do is they teach us to like mentalize and sit with emotions, and then they just go away.
Mhm.
And my experience is not that they just go away. My experience is that if you don't express them
Mm.
and release them, then they actually like get worse or create things in your life because they need attention. So they
Yeah,
actually manifest.
it is really interesting, isn't it? Because I think when we have something what we perceive to be a negative emotion like anger or rage or a grievance, it is a case that instead of actually learning to address it in a productive manner, we tend to criticize, pull it apart, and think there's something wrong with us, which tends to lead to burying and trying to suppress the emotion or to convince ourselves to go deeper down into a hole of self-criticism and doubt and thinking there's something constantly wrong with you, to actually realizing that emotions are normal. There's something that we feel in every second of every day of our living existence. We feel a varying degree of emotions, but what we actually learn to do with them is imperative to actually understanding and learning, as I said before. But in this framework for your book, what has been the true sort of passion that's made you feel like there's this kind of, because for me, I see this gap in the market. There are so many fantastic self-help tools out there, but what doesn't seem to be addressed enough is what we went back to, like the discussion in the beginning, is this idea and concept of actually being able to sit with your emotions and can you feel comfortable in the emotions and accept them for what they are, which is always something that can be turned into something positive and light.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I do believe that there is a path where we sit with emotions and then they become joy, right? But
Yeah.
our society that's in a healthy in someone that has a healthy connection with their emotions and has a community around them that can see and be seen.
Mm.
um because what emotions do is they sort of like fill us up. It's an energy in motion, motion, energy in motion.
Mm.
And we're basically channels and we have these emotions flowing through us.
Mm.
And what we do is we restrict them. So if we get angry, we can tense up.
Mm.
And like, you can actually feel it in your body when you get angry or sad, right? There's a sadness of like, maybe it's in the throat that somebody
Mm.
will clench their throat. And then that emotion is now in there. And over time they build up. And so when we're later as adults, we start to have physical symptoms. Like I was on a coaching call just last night. Someone had, I forget what it was. It was maybe something in their pancreas. And this person's in really good shape and they do yoga and all of that. But their emotions, they don't connect to them. And so it was his wife that was talking about it, and she thinks that it's because he's not able to express himself. Um, which I have a theory
Mm.
on why that is. I actually think it's fairly simple. Um, I think it's because we're conditioned to fear what we should love. Like that's the basis of it.
Okay,
And
that's interesting. I like that. Yeah.
and this part, it actually plays out so much in relationships because men are taught to fear crying, being sad and soft, and women are taught to fear yelling, being angry and hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
But we're also taught to do the opposite because men are watching, movies about violence and playing video games about violence, and women are portrayed as like, crying and dress up. And so we're
Yeah.
conditioned as men to be afraid of the way that women will naturally react in an argument. And as men, it's the same way. So we
Mm.
grow up all our lives and then we end up, which is wonderful and beautiful, and uniting together. And then the problems of the world become too much for us to handle. And so then we don't have these emotions and we end up like the anger comes up and we don't know how to properly express it.
Mm.
And the female is naturally afraid of that. And there's a lot of reasons why but we won't get into here. But and then the man can't cry. And so the female will cry typically in a typical, not typical is not the right word, but if not the right word, but
Doesn't
the feminine will cry. Feminine will cry, and then the masculine gets more angry. And so it's all just about conditioning and about being on these two different emotional sides. And so
really.
then the solution is very natural just to like get better at anger and actually open self up to crying as a man.
Yeah, I think, there is obviously the generational thing, which obviously comes into play here, that men were taught to suppress their emotions and that it was a weakness to show emotion. And you're right, with women to stand up to a man or to have a voice and be heard was also seen as a woman not knowing her place. And you could be perceived many years ago as being a witch for actually having an opinion. Which is crazy, but it is like, for me, I think the varying degrees of being able to release what I refer to as like stagnant energy in the system is so important. So crying, anger, I mean, when we refer to things like rage, we think of, I don't know, my vision is someone taking a baseball bat or something, but it's kind of like, if it's in a sort of a controlled environment as such, I don't know if that's the right word to use, controlled environment. Do you think that it, no outlet for me is deemed as wrong, as long as it's not inflicting pain or hurt towards another living being? To feel rage and be out in the woods and let it out in a scream, for me, is a positive way of just kind of releasing this energy from the system. And
Yeah.
do you think that actually talking about things and being able to express things in that manner is the most productive way, or what kind of routes would you suggest?
Yeah. Um, so I had a coach that told me, particularly with anger,
Mm.
my own journey of anger is I was very afraid of it. So I actually have a kind of a different stance, I would say, than most men because I was taught to fear anger through the feminine, which is kind of a different approach. So my whole life, I suppressed anger incredibly
Mm.
because it was dangerous. And when I had a coach tell me that it's okay to be angry, it's just not okay to hurt someone,
Yeah.
like that was really deep for me because I was
Yeah.
being intentional about it. But yeah, being okay to be angry, not hurt somebody. And so then I learned tools to do that. So like going in the woods and yelling, like that's amazing, right? That I think that's great. Um, if someone hasn't approached anger like their whole life, then then what can be really helpful is doing things and like building up this muscle. So you
Mm.
may not always be able to go out and yell, um, but there's things like just hitting pillows, right?
Yeah.
Like putting a pillow down, holding your arms like this so that you're not going to hurt your wrists, and then smashing down like that.
Oh, I
And
love to scream into a pillow and give it a good punch when I need to. To let it out.
it's so neat. I thought it was cliche, but I started doing it. And then there's something about setting aside like 10 minutes to
Yeah.
intentionally just go into this emotional state.
Yeah.
And oh man, it really like it'll
Mm.
bring up a lot of energy.
Mm.
And people might be surprised of how much like more energetic they are in general life by doing that sort of this emotional work.
It's like, it's like going back to the principles of how animals deal with situations in the wild, isn't it? That theory behind like shaking it off or having a good roar or whatever it is, just to like let it out. And I don't know, sort of like I think in different cultures as well, we suppress things even more. I always make a joke about the British because I think we are really bad. I'm not saying we're the worst, but we are really bad at expressing our emotions. It's
Mhm.
like we hold everything in and we're so reserved, and it's just like it's damaging. It is damaging.
It's so damaging.
Yeah, it
Yeah, the
is.
shaking off is just real. Yeah, it's so important. But the shaking off happens like if you've been able to build these skills and do it, that then you can just shake it off. But
Mm,
what happens is we get so clogged up and are not used to expressing that we need to do something more intentional
yeah,
than shaking off. So the
like
shaking off is like you'll get there. People will
yeah.
get
Yeah. So for anybody who, he's sort of starting out and thinking, you know what, I feel angry on a daily basis, or I feel down. I mean, or I have problems with moving past certain events in their lives. What would be your recommendations for someone who's starting out and trying to get in touch with their emotions, and how to kind of start this process of clearing,
there.
emptying, taking out the
Yeah.
rubbish?
I think I think support is critical. So, a good therapist, a good coach, like I've always recommend that is having somebody that can support.
Yeah,
Um, but then like in terms of the like what can you do? Like it's really the first step is just like knowing that it's okay to feel this stuff.
yeah,
Because by going through this, you'll actually clear it and then and end up with joy. Now,
yeah,
like somebody with PTSD, like myself, suppressed anger their entire life, it's going to take time. Like it's a
yeah,
journey. So being patient about it, but it's really like it is all about just opening yourself up to feeling and then being able to express these emotions.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's recognizing to feel is normal. It's
Hmm.
normal to feel. It's abnormal to try not to feel.
Yeah.
We're living human feeling beings. It's the way that we're designed, and we can't shut off our emotions because it's part of what makes us who we are. It's what we learn from. It's how we develop. Um, I'd love to know more about your book and
Yeah.
how you've aimed it more towards children. What's
Mhm.
what's the passion and the drive behind that?
Yeah. So there's a lot I could say, but I've been a project manager for 10 years, and process and flow is something that just
Mhm.
is the way that my mind works. And so what I wanted to do with this book is give a process for something that because there's so much safety in a process. Uh,
Mhm.
like practices are really good to have, but they often happen in sort of a isolation. And so I
Yeah.
wanted to be able to say, like, here's something that you can do no matter what is happening.
Mm.
Um, and then I saw this gap of expression and this missing piece of expression. And my kids, all kids are naturally very expressive. They're very talented at it. But then as parents in society, we actually stifle it down rather quickly, which I noticed on playgrounds of seeing other kids
Yeah.
and playing with my kids. It just draws in like kids are just drawn into us.
Yeah.
Uh, and so this story it's to rewrite my own past. It's to give my kids the tools that I didn't have that I wish I had had sooner in life.
Mm.
Um, no regrets, but yeah. And so the process is the way of emotions, and so it's 3 steps. I tried to basically simplify, take a lot of what I've learned from psychology,
Mhm.
and then kind of blend it with yoga concepts. And I really like parts therapy a lot. I find that super, super helpful. So that's a big
Yeah.
part of component, internal family systems. So the way stands for witness, accept, and express. And I
Mm.
believe if you do those 3 things, the witness, you really get to be impartial and understand what the emotion is that's happening. And then you build that up like it's an inquiry process, and it can also just be fun because for kids I just have ways to do it for fun. And then you accept it, and that's the part that we are missing so much is the accepting and allowing. People use the word surrender. I intentionally didn't use surrender in this case. We're accepting it and saying this is okay, and
Yeah.
then expressing and
Yeah.
express. I
Yeah.
don't see it anywhere. Sorry.
Surrender can sometimes feel like you're losing like a sense of control, I think, for some people. And that's why sometimes, it feels like a little bit of a intimidating word to an extent. So how could people sort of reach out to you if they want to know more information about your book? Do you have any links? I'm
Yeah.
really keen to endorse this because being a mum of an 8-year-old boy, and I have a very explosive child. I have a 0 to 10 child. I have to say, I was the same when I was young. I was the kid that fell off the bike and screamed the place down. You would have thought that I'd lost a limb, and I have a little graze on my elbow. So I've been really lucky throughout my life that I've never really had a problem with expressing my emotions. And my son doesn't know how to he knows how to express only in the forms of anger and releasing his frustration through his anger. He's got a lot of rage in there, but he doesn't know how to kind of pacify it and how to talk more calmly about things. So for me as a parent, there's a lot of explanation into exploration into understanding his emotions, understanding what makes him angry, understanding what makes him so reactive. I'm lucky that I can see a lot of myself in him. So it's like, I don't blow up every 5 minutes or anything, but I'm very capable of just going blah, and just letting it out, usually on my own, to be honest, these days. But um, what kind of advice could you give to me, as a parent in being able to perhaps channel his energy more effectively to make him feel, less like he's got to have these explosive reactions? I don't want to taper them down because, for me, I just think he needs to be able to express. It's very important that he can express. It's very important that he feels heard, and it's very important that he feels understood. They're the things that for me I think is the priority. And I always go, okay, let's just try and break this down and calm the situation down a little bit. But what
Yeah.
advice can you give me?
Yeah, my heart goes out to you. My 4-year-old is the very same way, incredibly expressive because I've been telling him this. And it has sort of gone in a direction where he can be more expressive in places that aren't appropriate to be that
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
And so that's really the balance to all of this, and why there's like other parts to it beyond just expression. For
Mhm.
adults, expression's the piece we're missing. For kids, they're good at it. And so it's
Yeah.
more about the other paths. It's more about the witness and accept. And
Mhm.
so I really like Life Keto. That's something I found recently. But like giving techniques like breath work is really helpful. There's something called a river check-in.
Yeah.
Um, and like basically if they're too icy or too hot. And then the ninja breath has really worked out well for my kids. They like the
I,
ninja breath for
would
boys.
you be happy to do an example of ninja breath? Because now I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's the natural calming breath. So getting into the parasympathetic sympathetic nervous system. So it's a longer exhale than an
Okay.
inhale. In
Yeah.
through the nose, out through the mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I usually just you could count for them too. Counting could be really good. So like in 4, out 8. So
Mhm.
and then just repeating that.
Perfect. Uh,
Yeah, I think the counting is really helpful
the
because then it
experiment
gets
will start tonight.
yeah. Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah,
Um,
people can reach me. I write most on Facebook, so you can look me up on Facebook, Jake Trigg.
yeah.
Um, on Instagram, I'm ATX at large.
Hmm.
Uh, the book is coming out on February 28th, and so I'm not going to do pre-order. It's just going to go straight to Amazon.
Yeah.
If you find me on socials, then you'll be able to
Perfect.
find it through
Yep.
there.
We'll put links in.
Yeah, cool.
Oh, amazing. Is there anything else that you think would be really poignant here for adults and parents to actually hear?
Um, well, I just to share something for myself, like I was in a Reiki session the other day and they asked like what we have a dream about. And my dream was really like this world that people can be free to express emotions and then know that they're safe so that other people actually don't then respond and react. So that if we could just let it out. And so that led me to say, why don't I just do a class? And so I'm going to start teaching a class in Austin, Texas, if you have any viewers there, uh, solely on emotional expression and like working through the chakras and various practices like ecstatic dance and breath work and whatnot.
Sure.
Going into each emotion and
Yeah.
then like making sounds and
Yeah.
letting it out in a community setting. So I'm super, super excited about it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Amazing. Will you be doing online sessions as well for anyone like me who's stuck in the UK and can't get to Texas at the moment?
I would love to actually. That's a wonderful suggestion. So yeah, I'll do it.
Perfect. Perfect. And it is really interesting with the emotions because your behavior affects every living being in the universe. It's not just you who it affects because your attitudes, your behaviors, your reactions to things, your even energetic presence that you give out into the world deeply affects everyone.
Yeah.
You know, you and I are probably from the ethos that everything is one. So naturally, I always think, oh, how can I understand this better? How can I grow from this better without trying to go too much into the over analytical mind of thinking what's wrong? Because there's nothing wrong. It's just evolvement. That's all it is. We're evolving.
Right.
Yeah, and from a personal perspective as well, I mean, for me, the big things that always the greatest importance, not Bodhi's bone right now. It's so noisy, sorry. Um, are unconditional love and
Mhm.
forgiveness. And they are the two leading emotions that really, for me, line up my entire purpose in life. That is my message to the world. So let's see where we go with both of our messages.
Oh, I love that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria. This was really fun. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording, but I do have a little bit of time if you